what would you say if I said that I could bring them back?
I guess I'd say I never thought of that.
Well, alright, hold tight, you might want to stand back, because one small John is coming intact.
St. John forward, spitting out some more words, fully intact, jacked, ready to rap and attack. Small John on your lawn, living like a gnome, hit you with my lyrics like a bullet to your dome.
Tonight when he comes up here, he's either gonna kill or he's gonna suck. But there's no in between for Mr. John Forward.
Oh, well, I didn't know any of that.
Well, that's what I've been trying to say the whole time.
It's Monday night at 9 o'clock, so that means it's time for St. John Forward Radio. That's the show that you're listening to today. This is very special election day coverage without any knowledge of what's going on in the election for the most part. I have to confess, this shouldn't be a confession. I don't feel bad about it. I didn't vote today. And all of the get out there, you lazy bastards, and vote posts, I don't care what you think, just do it, is not enticing me. It just makes me dig my heels in further. This is an hour after the polls have closed, so I'm not trying to sway anybody to my side of things. I'm not saying that I've got this whole thing worked out, but I thought I would take a little bit of a time just to explain my position as best I can. I'm no political scientist, but it's not because I'm lazy. I used to vote. It's been at least a decade, and most of the times that there's been an election in that decade, I still drove my dear wife May down to the polls so that she could fulfill her civic duty, and I hung it in the car and waited for her to be finished. So I wasn't saving myself any extra time. Tonight I didn't have to leave the house at all. She just got off the bus at an earlier stop on her way home from work, so I had to participate even less. But I guess part of it, and we'll get to more. None of the available political parties really represent me, and honestly, it's hard to find a lot of people that share my political persuasions without them being dangerously, frighteningly religious or possibly bigoted. But I don't know. I just I don't believe in choosing the lesser evil. It's not really much of a choice for me. I feel like I'm accomplishing more, at least in my own mind, by not participating. I'm officially casting my vote for none of the above, and once the numbers come in, I guarantee that we'll probably find out that none of the above won by a landslide tonight. And that's not how it's going to be counted, though. They're just going to say all those people are just lazy and apathetic, and probably some of them are. I don't know what percentage of them aren't. But what does it say about the whole system if that many people don't give a shit about it? Why is that a problem with the voters and not with the vote itself? When I was a teacher, there was lots of kids that weren't interested in doing any work, and if they weren't bothering anybody, I generally let them put their heads down and go to sleep and get bad marks. I wasn't very good at tricking a bad student into becoming a good student. And when the midterm home reports came out, I didn't get away with blaming those lazy, apathetic students. It was my job as a teacher to motivate them to want to participate. And I failed. So maybe we could hold the people running the country to at least the standard of a Sussex High School grade 9 math teacher. But whenever somebody's complaining about the lazy, apathetic non-voters, I don't think that they're particularly upset that people aren't exercising their patriotic rights and duties. I think most of them are upset that those votes that they assume would have gone to their team. They're upset because all the old people go out and vote for the conservative parties that they don't like, and not a lot of conservative voters out there wringing their hands because there isn't enough young people going out and rocking the vote. not many Trump supporters in the U.S. complaining about low voter turnouts. They're just happy that their guy won. And, if you don't like any of the options, why don't you go in and spoil your ballot and prove that you're not just lazy? Well, I'm conscientiously deciding not to participate because I feel like if I do, I'm endorsing the process and I'm endorsing the results. And I'm not saying that we should flip the switch and go full on anarchy tomorrow, but I just feel like voting and participating, it kind of perpetuates the idea that this is something that we need and will always need. I think that we should at least try to wean ourselves off of being reliant on the government to solve all of our problems. Like, maybe I could be like an agnostic socialist. Like, if nobody else has a better idea and we just can't get it done, okay, then maybe you guys can step in and take care of it. But that shouldn't be step one. I think that someday, I hope that we'll evolve towards a more decentralized, non-coercive, non-governmental society, and I don't know what that looks like exactly, and I'd be suspicious of anybody who claims that they do know, but I just think we can do better than this, and as long as we limit ourselves to government solution A or government solution B or government solution C, we're not ever going to find the best possible solution. And if that happens to be government solution Q, then sign me up for it. But we're never going to hear about possible non-government solution A, B, C, D, all of them, as long as we stay in this box. So the way it's been going is we generally vote for the Liberals, and then we get mad at them for a while, and then we vote Conservatives until we get mad at them, and then it swings back the other way. Just moves back left and right, all along that straight line and everywhere in between. And I just wish we'd take a minute to take a look at what's going on up, down, and in and out, not just the left and right, because we live in a three-dimensional world, and all we're given is one-dimensional options. That's very insightful. I'm quite proud of myself right now. But that's how it's set up, and there's too many people invested in how it is for anything to change, and they want us to play their game so that we don't realize how powerless we are in the whole thing. And I don't know how low voter turnout needs to be before anybody admits that there's a problem. I don't know. I don't know how bad it needs to get, but it just seems weird to me that these people get a fraction of the votes from the fraction of people who voted and act like they have a mandate to decide what's what. And I don't know. I think that anybody that wants to be a career politician to begin with should be immediately disqualified. These people don't have any principles. They're just in a constant job interview, and they'll say what they think that you want to hear to get the job. And like last time I was in Fredericton, I noticed signs for a guy named Dominic Carty running as Progressive Conservative, which is a ridiculous retitling that happened a long time ago, but I won't get into that. I thought the name sounded familiar, so I looked him up, and it turns out last round, this guy was the head of the NDP party, and a few years later, this guy flops from being the head of the most left-leaning of the big parties right over to the most right-leaning party that we have. So that's the kind of principles these people have, and these are the people that we want to put in charge of making our laws and spending our money. And I don't know. I don't think that we should have. There's a problem with power, and I think that we should take away the power and spread it out. And we shouldn't have positions that with this much power that depends so heavily on having the right man, woman, non-binary to fill it for it to be effective. Like, I don't know what the solution is, but I think we need something that can self-regulate it when it's not working. We don't have to wait a few more years before we pick another awful person that's going to screw it up. But I don't know. That's just best that happens now is they screw up, and then 4 years later, they get to tell us how, since they're so expertly involved with digging the hole that we're in, they're in the best position to find us the best ladder out of it. But I don't know. I think voting breeds more apathy because people think that they're actually doing something, and voting for a lesser evil is still voting for evil, and I'm exercising my right not to be a part of it. I just don't want to encourage these baby kissers and handshakers, so I voted for none of the above today. And just wanted to welcome first-time St. John Forward Radio guest. I've got David Hall. Hello.
Hey.
That is all that is required of you for now. So we're going to play a quick song, and we'll be back with David. I've been meaning to play something off of the new Clutch album. It's been out for a little while now, and this one seemed appropriate. It's called How to Shake Hands, and we'll be back on St. John Forward Radio.
Are you cool? Well, I'm cool. Is everybody cool? Well, let's get hot. Grassroots all across this great nation, and I am truly humbled and greatly accept the nomination. I'm gonna be president of the United States. First Tuesday in November, rock it down and save the date. Live music in the White House, stripping BYOB. The public wanna get down, it is our collective destiny. I'm gonna kiss all the babies, maybe kiss the mamas too. I don't need the Secret Service, I know how to walk a room. I'm gonna be president of the United States. I was born to be president of these United States. On the day I was born, all the nurses and doctors take the boy out of his crib and put him in the executive office. First thing that I'm gonna do is disclose all those UFOs. Put Jimi Hendrix on a $20 bill and Bill Hicks on a 5 note. Hot damn, the democratic process, what a time to be alive. Oh, I'm ready to give the people what they want, and what they want is straight talk and no jive. Exit polls coming in, Rhode Island and American Samoa. We have more results coming in from Puerto Rico and both Dakotas. Breaking news happening right now. I believe we're ready to call it. Do you want us to call it? I believe we have a winner. Thank you very much. I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have done it without you. Drinks on me. Thank you very much. I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have done it without you. Drinks on me. First thing that I'm gonna do is go for a ride on a UFO. Put Jimi Hendrix on the $20 bill and Bill Hicks on a 5 note. Hot damn, the democratic process, what a time to be alive. Oh, I'm ready to give the people what they want, and what they want is straight talk and no jive.
Back on St. John Forward Radio, exclusive election coverage. Here with new comedian on the scene, David Hall. How are you doing tonight?
Pretty good. You?
Not too bad. So, after my little spiel, you didn't vote? You seemed shocked. Are you disappointed in me?
No, I mean, I'm not disappointed.
Well, what's your stance on this whole deal, and people that don't vote, or the election in general?
I don't know. I hate when people say if you don't vote, you can't complain, because to me personally, if you vote for the people in power, I feel like that gives you less of a right to complain. It's like if you lit something on fire and then complain to another guy who didn't stop you from lighting something on fire, you know?
Yeah, that frustrates me too, because there's a George Carlin bit that somebody posted on Facebook earlier today. I was gonna play it on tonight, but it's more the main angle of it is that people suck, which I'm more optimistic than that, so I don't really fully. It's a funny bit, but one of his points is that he doesn't vote, and that like you said, if you do vote, then you're the one that's saying. Like, I feel like casting a vote for me is going and saying, I accept the results of this thing. Here's the one that I want. But however it turns out, then I believe in the process. And I don't. So I don't. So I take it you did vote today?
I actually voted last Wednesday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there was an advanced poll at the university.
Do you mind telling us which party you voted for and why?
Well, my parents listen to the station, so maybe not.
Okay. Well, what do you? To be honest, I took a quick skim through the party platforms earlier tonight, and I don't know. It's all nonsense anyway. But do you have a good idea of kind of what the differences are between the platforms for the different parties?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna just say I didn't vote for the Progressive Conservatives and People's Alliance.
Okay,
It's
the People's Alliance is a new one. I don't know much
Yeah.
about them. What's their deal?
I don't know. I mean, the best way I can describe their platform is it kind of sounds like that guy who doesn't vote if they made their own political party, honestly.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I should be on board with these people. No, May earlier tonight, she said something. She referred to them as the alt-right light.
Yeah.
Does that sound about right?
That really is.
Are they? I took a quick skim through their stuff, but again, like these platforms on their website is just job interview nonsense anyway. But I did like the idea of giving like auditing all the government books and like eliminating waste. I'm on board with that.
Yeah.
But the candidate in my riding, again, that's one of these frighteningly religious people from what I gather, and not to be intolerant of religious people, but I'm being honest here. I used to be one of them, and I want to be tolerant of everybody's personal beliefs, but religious people are like number one when it comes to imposing their ideas on other people against their will. So I don't know, when this guy mentions various churchy dealings like 5 times in 2 paragraphs, it gives me pause.
Yeah, definitely.
So are they? I noticed some stuff in there about bilingualism. I have seen people posting on Facebook like about how they believe in maintaining our bilingual status. Is this the party that's making a big stink about like screw French people? Is that kind of their angle?
Kind of. I mean, not quite that bad.
Well, they're not going to say that publicly, but is that the undercurrent?
Basically, and I think as the party goes on, they will attract more and more of that screw the French people crowd, and eventually that crowd will just start running for them and take over the party, like even if they're fairly moderate now, I think they'll get worse over time.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I guess like if I had to put like a pin in it, I would say my political leanings would be like economically conservative but socially progressive, which isn't really a thing in this country. But again, most of I guess like whenever like the libertarians and stuff, I'm not really on board with that either. I find it baffling that they I guess the analogy that I would use is that if you think that government is a cancer, it's kind of ridiculous that you just want to have a little bit of it. it's going to grow. But I don't know. Most of the people in that camp are not as socially progressive as I would like them, because there's always this ugly undercurrent of like no abortions and that kind of stuff,
Yeah, exactly.
which I'm not on board for. Everybody, mandatory abortions for all is the official John Forward stance. But yeah, and I don't know. So yeah, I'm all for, like, I don't like the idea. Like, I want to take care of people that need it, but I don't think the best way to do that is just to throw money at the problem. And I don't think that like laws have any business kind of telling people how to operate. Like, again, I think that the only laws when it comes down to it that we need are don't hurt anybody and don't steal their stuff. Everything else pretty much flows from that, and anything beyond that is probably an overreach, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't know. The only people that agree with that are also insane Christians. I don't know where the overlap is there, because I don't know. It seems weird. Like, yeah, but you're right. I think the anti-French people will kind of take over. I think that it kind of started out like, I think in the U.S., like, Tea Party kind of started out with sort of a libertarian platform, but then, like, the evangelical Christians kind of engulfed that, and then we've got Trump. So yeah, it's an ugly path to go down to. So yeah, there's not many people that I feel a good solidarity with in socialist haven of Canada. I don't know, but I want to take care of people. I think that people should be able to like get health care and education and stuff. I don't think throwing money at the problem is really the solution. I don't know what the solution is, but maybe we could, the first thing that people say is like, and again, my background as a teacher, I know government funded education is not good. At least the version of it that I saw.
I guess it's better than no education at all, though.
Right, but that's the kind of fake dichotomy. That's not the word.
Dichotomy?
Yeah, that's the one. It's not an either or thing. Like, I'm not saying that I have a solution, but I just feel like we should be more open to, like, hey, let's try this thing and see if it works, and if the government version is the best one, then that one will win out, and it doesn't need to be imposed on us.
Right.
But the way I feel about education in particular, like, anything that gets paid for automatically doesn't really have a lot of incentive to do a good job.
True.
And like, people can't, like, school does not work well for most of the people in it. They kind of talk a lot about differentiation and teaching to all levels and stuff, but honestly, my experience of it was just, you have to teach to the middle. There's not the resources or training or ability to do any better. So all the kids on the upper end are bored, and the kids on the lower end are not learning anything anyway. So it's just teach it to the middle. And I think I've said this before, but the last year that I worked full-time as a teacher at Sussex High, we had a staff meeting, and the previous year, the biggest number one budget item that they spent the most money on that year was photocopies.
Really?
Yeah.
Of what?
Sheets and whatever nonsense. Like, that's the best that we can. And again, Sussex Regional High School, not necessarily like top of the pack.
True.
But it's, I don't know, with something like that, it's just kind of, they get funded anyway, so if they're doing a bad job and they're getting bad results, when it comes time for budget, they're like, oh, look at these poor students, they're suffering and they're not doing well, give us more money.
Yeah, I mean, some schools, though, in the U.S., apparently, if you do poorly, they cut your funding, so the students end up doing even worse, so it ends up being this, like, vicious cycle over there.
Yeah, well, and again, the U.S. is
Another
is a worse version of everything. Like, from what I understand, New Brunswick is near the bottom of the pack in this country, but we're still like better than like even some of the best states. So,
right,
things can be worse, but I think they can be better. And
that's true.
I think I don't know. I just think that competition, this is kind of, and again, I hate going the free market route because most of the free market people are lunatics, and I don't like being on that team a lot of the time. But I think competition makes everybody do a better job. If this school is doing a bad job and they've got crappy teachers, if somebody else has a school over here that does a good job and has good teachers and actually shows results, people should be able to say, hey, I'm going to this one instead. And that's not really an option. There are private schools, but that's something that only the richest of the rich can afford. It's not like you can just transfer whatever they would have spent sending your kid to public school over to this other one if you want to go to a private school or something. I don't know. So there's the only people that can afford it are people that are already paying the taxes for it and then have the extra tens of thousands of dollars of tuition a year to throw on top of it.
Right, it probably costs, like some of them would probably cost more than a university to go to.
Yeah, and well, it costs a ridiculous amount to send your kid to public school. I don't like this idea of free school and free healthcare. It's not. Somebody's paying for it. We just don't see the bill.
Right.
It's hard to nail down numbers. I did some research and and this is a few years ago, but it's hard to tie down a number, but based on what I could find on the internet, every kid in every public school gets between $11,000 and $19,000 a year per head, which is just insane. Like, I could just imagine how good of a job that I could do with 10 kids and $190,000 a year.
That doesn't even seem right. Like, that's literally higher than my tuition, like $19,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when people aren't signing the checks themselves. When it's just a big pool of money and they're just dividing it up, then the cost can skyrocket. That's the other thing, like healthcare. They're like, well, if we didn't have free healthcare, we'd be like in the States and you break your arm and it costs you $10,000 to get a cast. Well, how about we look at why it costs $10,000 to get a cast put on instead of just paying for it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Apparently the U.S., they actually spend more money on healthcare than any other nation on Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, like even more than countries with like socialized healthcare.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, I don't know. I think like it's so hard to, because there's no real good example of it. Like I think some version of insurance would solve that. Like not the way that it works now, where it's kind of mixed in with government and it's kind of mandatory, but you know, a good insurance company would just be and again, if they're all competing and they aren't kind of locked into this tightly regulated thing where there's one company that can say, hey, for this many dollars a month, this is the coverage that we can give you, and it's really in their best interest to be efficient and to kind of be preemptive about stuff and make sure that, you know, people are incentivized for living a more healthy life instead of punishing them for being unhealthy. Like you can, you know, I think like even through work, if you don't smoke, your health insurance is a little bit less. I think stuff like that is a good idea. But to an insurance company that does not want to spend a lot of money on healthcare is going to make sure that you take care of yourself and that you get regular checkups and that you catch stuff before it becomes a problem. Whereas I feel like now you kind of go and you get looked at and nobody really does anything until it becomes kind of a big expensive issue. And again, if nobody's signing the checks, then they can charge Medicare whatever they want. I knew somebody who was visiting the country from elsewhere, and she had to go to the hospital or something, and she actually got to see the bill, and just like $500 just to walk in the door, and just the item, like just every individual is just gouge because nobody sees the bill. It's just they send it off to Medicare and it all gets paid for, and that's, I don't know, that's part of the reason why university costs keep going up and up and up and up and up, because it's being subsidized by like government student loans and stuff, so people can afford to pay more and more and more. So the more that they can milk out of the system, the more they're going to charge.
Right.
And I don't know, it creates backwards set of incentives.
Yeah, well, I mean, something else that's interesting too is universities, they're actually like the ranking system that they use now, it's based on like facilities too, like outside of the actual education experience. Like that's why these universities in the States that cost like $100,000 to go to, like they have climbing walls, just massive gyms, because the facilities help them with the rankings. So
Yeah.
like you're incentivized to pay money for stuff that isn't anything to do with education that you don't really need, you know?
Yeah, and like there's nothing wrong with going out of your way to, if you're competing with another university and you want somebody to come here and like, hey, do you want to come? If all other things are equal, I'll go to the one with the climbing wall
Right.
as opposed to the one that doesn't. But if it is just an artificial way to kind of boost their ranking on this list so that they can charge more and some more tuition, that's kind of not great. And that's kind of like even through like my work insurance, I'm not paying a lot per month for all the extra stuff, but there's a bunch of extra, you know, I have a science background, so I'm skeptical of all the kind of like acupuncture and all that like weird homeopathy, all that nonsense that is not, I won't say nonsense. The politically correct way to put it would be it's not scientific, not science-based or results-based, but all of that stuff gets covered because somebody lobbied the government to say, oh, my natural homeopathic practices need to be included on work insurance, which drives the cost up for everything.
Right.
I don't know. I don't like it. But anyway, that's the good political chat. We're halfway through the show, so going to take a quick break. Do you want to tell us about the song that you have selected for us to play? Sort of selected.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. It chose a song by the Tragically Hip. I just found out it can't be, what was it, a single?
Well, it's kind of nebulous. The rule is a top 40 hit. I don't know of what resource can be referenced, but generally anything, especially with the hip, is something that it's another government anti-competition thing, so that the CRTC gives us our license. We're not allowed to unfairly compete with those poor classic rock stations in the city that can't keep the lights on because everybody's tuning into St. John Forward Radio.
Yeah, just listening to us to hear one Tragically Hip song, you know?
Yeah. But I think it's good, even if we didn't have to. I don't think it's a bad philosophy for the station to have, just in the sense of, they want to be kind of an alternative kind of thing, and it forces people kind of out of their box. Where I'm going to pick a song, you're going to pick the one that comes to mind for a lot of people is the one that's been beat into your head because it's been played a lot. Yeah. So, even if I didn't have to, I like mixing it up a bit. So we've got Lionized off of Fully Completely. As I was saying, I'm a big Tragically Hip fan, but this is one of the albums I haven't listened to. I think this might be the only album, except for maybe the last 2 or 3, that I don't own. So that's
Really?
a big part of my dad owned this one, so I never bought the CD myself, I guess, but I don't know. I should revisit it, but we're going to hear some Tragically Hip after a couple of words and a station ID. Let's see what the Coastlink Trail is first, and then we'll hear some Tragically Hip, and we'll be back with David Hall.
The Fundy Regional Service Commission invites you to a public open house to learn more about the recently proposed Coastal Link Trail and to provide feedback on all aspects of the project, including design elements, trail alignment options, and environmental components. The event takes place Tuesday, January 30th, 2018, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. at St. Mark's United Church on Dexter Drive in St. John. For more information, contact Colin Simic at 506-633-5000 or email at csimic@dillon.ca.
Community boy. You can put whatever slant on it you like, but if you want to say your name and that you're listening to 107.3 local FM. Community boy.
yeah. I know a lack I've got, abundance of extra space. Cold wind blowing over your private part. I know a lack you've got, to make a strong case for art.
We're back on St. John Forward Radio. We're still talking off mic about stuff. He just asked me we were talking a little bit more about. I was talking about the non-aggression principle and about how I guess I'm not really well versed in the ins and outs of it, but I guess the core of my philosophy would be that if there's aggression involved, involuntary aggression at some point down the chain, if you end up possibly getting thrown in a cage if you don't go along with this, then I think it's an ugly thing. So you asked me if a person has a right to be cured if they have an illness. And,
right, even if that means that you would have to take money from someone else.
But I don't think that you have to forcefully take money from somebody else. I think there's enough good people in the world that if this person is suffering unduly, then I think there's enough people that would pull together and do it. I don't enforcing forced charity. I don't. It's ugly, and I'd rather have a voluntary system set up. And again, people that are more cynical than I am just have this picture of people dying in the streets and kids not being educated and people getting sick, and I don't think, maybe in the short term because we're so used to kind of the selfish way that we are, but I think in the long term, and I think part of what proves it for me is that whenever I talk about this stuff, it's examples like that are always like, hey, what about this? But you wouldn't ask me that question if on some level you weren't appealing to the humanity inside of me. If you were expecting me to say, no, that person should die, you wouldn't ask me the question, probably.
Sure.
And yeah, I think there are very few people that would let that happen. And you know, there's lots of other ways that we can solve that problem other than stealing from Group X to give it to Group Y. I don't know. I think that there's enough things in place, and I think charity, voluntary charity, should have more of a role in society, which I'm going to be honest, I don't give a lot to charity myself. And again, part of it is the apathy that comes along with kind of our democracy, and it's not good, but most of us think, like, I pay my fair share, so my job here is done. Let the politicians take care of it. I wrote the check.
Right. Yeah, that's...
But you know, if people started, like, if we changed how it was and all of a sudden people were getting sick and not being able to get health care, and there was an eruption of violence and people weren't getting educated, I think everybody would be like, uh-oh, we've got to do something about this. And, you know, there's going to be some casualties in the meantime, but it's something that would eventually correct itself, I think.
Right, I mean, isn't that the old joke that, like, if we did have an anarchist society, we'd realize that people aren't getting educated, people aren't getting healthcare, so we band together and then put a bunch of money into a pot and then disperse it to the people who need it,
Sure.
have people manage it, and then after a while you realize, oh, hey, we have a government again.
Yeah, and if that's the best way to do it, then if we all want to volunteer for that program and it's actually showing results and we can't opt, and, you know, we have the option of opting out when it stops working, then I think that's fine. If that is the best way to do it, then that's how we should do it. I think that we should just start with, if we're deciding if we've got a problem to solve, I think that we should start with a complete blank slate, and one option would be this collective pooling of resources and put somebody in charge of distributing those resources. Maybe somebody else has a better idea, and maybe this group of people wants to pool their resources and spend this percent on education, this percent on, I don't know, fighter jets or whatever. You know, that maybe the different political parties, whoever you vote for, they get to decide how your tax dollars get spent. It shouldn't be kind of a one-size-fits-all thing. Maybe that's the way to go.
I don't know if maybe we just need smaller countries, you know? This is a country that loves fighter jets, this is a country that loves healthcare, and you just choose which country you want to go to, you know?
Yeah, well, even if, I think government would be less overreaching if it was more like local based, I guess, instead of kind of a top down kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I just think if somebody else has another option, nobody wants to hear about it, because it's either like, well, we can either get the government to do it this way or we can get the government to do it that way. But somebody's like, hey, what if we do it? I got an idea. Hey, shut up. That's not really an option.
That's true. I mean, I find the government, when they try to build the economy up, it usually doesn't go that well. Like, it's either give a bunch of money to the Irvings, give a bunch of money to a call center.
Yeah, and like for all of the good stuff that these well-meaning bleeding hearts like to throw at me when I argue for a voluntary society, it's all, well, what about education? What about, you know, you got to have some sort of a police force or people will be out raping and murdering each other. Those are the things that pretty much everybody is on board for. We want to keep on check on like violence and theft and just danger and healthcare and putting out fires and building roads and stuff. That's stuff that most people want. But what percentage of the total budget actually gets spent on that stuff? That's like number one. That's at the top of the list on all the political party platforms. But like, how much of it is spent on just this person making a 6-figure salary to show up and raise their hand every now and then? How much of it is spent on Stephen Harper buying fighter jets so that we can look cool on the world stage and spending $1 bajillion on that stuff? And all of the special interests and everything. Just, I think, even if we take into account the selfish people that are just going to hoard their riches and not help anybody out, I think if the rest of us got together and spent the exact same amount of money that we're paying in tax on just the good stuff, it would still like be 1 million times what we're spending on it now, I think. I don't know. That's just again, it's unverifiable nonsense that I'm spouting, but that's my picture of
Not
the world.
Necessarily. I mean, to be fair, if you look at your tax dollars, it's broken down what you spend on what. I mean, it's not like there's a part that says fighter jets this much, my salary this much, healthcare this much, but
yeah,
it's broken down.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think, like I said, if we look at the expensive stuff like healthcare, for example, if we looked more at why is it so expensive to get a broken arm, put a cast on a broken arm in a building, then it wouldn't be that big of a problem. People wouldn't be going into tens of thousands of dollars debt every time that something bad happens, because it's just, you go down and get the thing fixed, like getting your car fixed at a shop, which can be expensive too. But it's not like it costs $10,000 to get a spare tire fixed. But if we had socialized automotive care, then it probably would.
I don't know. I mean, like I said, the U.S., they don't really have the same level of socialized healthcare we do, but there's no one really regulating the price of certain drugs. So the companies,
they've got a whole. They don't have a free market. They have like crony corporate thing. It's just corporate welfare, basically. And the government enforces these monopolies, and there's only certain companies that are involved, and it stamps out competition. So like I don't think something like a corporation could exist in a true free market, because it doesn't make any sense. Just when something gets that big, it would be real easy for somebody else to come in with a fraction of the overhead and give the same thing for cheaper. And
well, depends on the service though. Like a hospital, I mean, you couldn't really just start like a little locally owned corner hospital uptown.
For certain things.
I mean, if you had $1 million, you could.
You could have. It would be a good investment if I saved up some money and went out and bought myself an MRI machine and set up John's MRI shop and
I guess you could
hired a technician that knows how to use it. Here's your printout. Take it to the other person down the road that knows how to interpret these results. Or, if I want to learn how to set a broken arm, like it's a learnable skill, just like any other job skill.
I guess.
I don't know. But if you've got like cancer or something and you need like surgery, then you're gonna want to go to the person that knows what they're doing, and you'll pay appropriately. But I don't know. I think a lot of the little stuff is stuff that could be farmed out, and I think some level of privatization. But again, there's got to be some sort of checks and balances. But I think that's up to the person that wants your money to say, hey, this is the service that I'm offering you, and if you get an infection because of my filthy scalpel, then here's this something built into our contract that it's going to be way more of a problem for me to deal with my screw up than it is for me to learn how to do it right. And the same thing with anything else. If somebody has a non-government solution, whatever the worries are that, well, what if this happens? Then it's up to them to say, well, okay, this is how we can ensure that thing you're afraid of isn't going to happen. And if they don't do a good job selling you on that, then you find somebody else who can.
Yeah. Actually, like private insurance companies for liability insurance, they actually help a lot with safety regulations sometimes. Like, say, like if you wanted liability insurance on a privately run hospital, if you were just using rusty scalpels, then they wouldn't give you insurance. Then if you got sued, you would lose everything. So I mean,
it's easier just to sterilize your scalpels.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it can be figured out. But $9.50 and
wow.
Lots of political talk here. This is it's been fun, but let's change gears a little bit. You were how long have you been doing comedy? It hasn't been that long.
Since March 23rd, I think was my first open mic night.
Okay. What was your first set at the R Bar?
No, it was actually at Yuck Yucks.
Oh, was it amateur night?
Yep.
Okay. Can I've always wanted to ask this. I want to know the thought process of the person that starts there, because most of the people in my orbit, they kind of come up through my thing. So were you aware that there was other stuff going on, or was that just the only thing that you knew about?
Honestly, I mean, I really mostly just knew about Yuck Yucks. Like I'd been there a couple of times. I went to a few of their amateur nights. I just thought, hey, what if I did that? Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, I started really digging into the scene, like finding open mic nights, that kind of thing. A friend recommended you, actually, so
okay,
yeah, that's how I got there.
So were you a big comedy fan like prior to this, before you went out to see any Yuck Yuck shows or?
I mean, a little bit. Yeah, I always
Okay.
love stand-up, like Louis C.K. I guess that's a controversial one now, but
You're allowed to say that you liked him as a comedian, unless you're just a fan of his hotel room behavior.
I'm gonna say his comedy career and just
Okay.
that.
Fair enough. Do you have an opinion on the attempted comeback, or I don't know if we got time to get into that can of worms?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a can of worms. I don't know. I mean, he did, like, a lot of the women he violated, like, they probably will never go back into comedy, so he did ruin a lot of people's careers. I really don't think it's fair that he just gets to come back after, like, a year's hiatus, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. Like, I know he did something wrong, and there should be consequences. I don't know what they should be, and I think that we should talk about it. I think if you insist on he needs to go live in the woods forever and never be seen again, if you're stuck in this kind of all or nothing, then there's enough people that want to see him come back that it's going to lean more towards nothing. And if you got to choose between he goes away forever or he just rolls back in without any consequence, I know which way it's going to go.
I don't know. Like, that's something else I find really disappointing too, is that he was sort of given a hero's welcome when he returned, you know? Like, he was on hiatus for a reason. Like, I did really enjoy his work, admittedly, but I don't enjoy his work enough to completely put aside that aspect of him, you know? Like,
Yeah, it's a complicated thing, and I think
Yeah.
it's a disservice to the whole thing not to have an open conversation about it where we decide, okay, well, what does that look like? What now? And I don't know. Again, we don't have time to get into that.
Yeah.
So how did you feel, I guess, after your first set? Was it immediately, like, did it have the hooks in where you were like, I need to do this now?
I don't know. I thought I did just well enough, you know? Like, I thought I got a decent routine, got a couple chuckles. People said I did well afterwards. I figured I would tweak it a bit, work on it. Then I did the exact same routine later. Then I just kept, you know, making new material. A lot of it was better, you know, just working my way up that way.
Right, but how did you get, like, the rush
Right.
from doing
Yeah.
it, or is it?
Yeah, for
okay.
sure. The first time, yeah. Just
Yeah, I think that's a good start. I don't know. I think like you've come along pretty well.
thanks.
You've got some solid material.
thank you.
Actually last night I invited you to be on No Jokes Barred Deluxe in November, so you can do that for 12 other comedians on the big show. But yeah, no, you're doing very well. You had a set last night at McGill's and went pretty well. That was
thank you.
last minute. You just arrived and they asked you if you wanted to go on.
Yeah, the first set I did at Yuck Yucks, a lot of material I did that night, it was actually from that set.
Okay.
Yeah, I just figured I'd try reusing it, see if it...
Yeah, well,
went
I
better,
think
you know?
some people it's all about new material, but you know it's important to turn stuff over because even if it's good the first time, then it'll be great the 10th
Right.
time.
Yeah.
And that's part of the process, and you kind of need the audience feedback because you know we like to consider ourselves genius writers of things, but you don't know until you sell it to a bunch of different rooms and different people and see what gets a laugh and what doesn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, I even now I'm usually not prepared to do something to show up and hey, do you want to go on? So good for you for being able to do that. Especially early on, I had to be very, very, very prepared
Thank
to
you.
do anything. So you did well, and
thank you.
yeah, and I especially liked your set about. I'm not going to burn your jokes, but I enjoyed your set about the kind of pot culture that you did at the last McGill's show. That was that was an inspired piece, and I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
But do you have anything coming up other than No Jokes Barred at O'Leary's? Or you're also going to be at No Jokes Barred at the R Bar this month on the 20th. I had to bump you from last month.
Right.
Anything else coming up?
I'm hoping to get onto Hell's Basement soon.
Yeah, that's a fun room. You should get in on that. But yeah, lots of stuff. I don't have anything coming up. Actually, I do. I've been talking about it for months. I'm finally biting the bullet. I got a guest spot on Saturday at Yuck Yucks. I got 5 minutes, and I'm gonna go up with no safety net. I'm gonna try to do all crowd work, and hopefully I don't crash and burn. So we'll see how that goes, and then. What else do I got? I'm not going to be on the No Jokes Bard Deluxe. Brittany Campbell's coming in to headline that, and I let her fill out the lineup. She's bringing some people up with Halifax, including former guest Chanel Frere. That's the first Friday of October. Don't remember what the date. Brian Otter's also on the show, and 2 other people I don't know. I should have looked it up before now, but anyway, the event will be posted, and talk more about this next week, but exclusive scoop, gonna be doing a show at Callie's Pub, formerly Callahan's, on Thursday, October 25th. Brian Giles is gonna headline, or he's gonna host that one, and Adam Landry, who's coming on the show next week, is gonna be featured in the middle, and I'm going to attempt to headline it. I'm going to aim for 45 minutes to an hour on a Thursday night. Be my first time doing a set that long, so we'll see how it goes. Gearing up. I want to do figure out a new hour for the Fringe Festival next year, so this is going to be a start. So yeah, lots of stuff coming up in October. Like I mentioned, October 20th at the R Bar. Friday the 19th, I'm going to be at People's Pub in St. Stephen, and I think that's it. Anyway, thank you for coming on the show, David. I feel like we're just scratching the surface, so you'll have to come back sometime and we'll chat some more. But that's all we got. I'm here every Monday night, 9 to 10 on local FM, St. John Forward Radio. You can listen to the other episodes on johnforward.com. That's a show. Good night.